Be Wealthy and Smart, episode 1493.
Step into a world of wealth and financial freedom without budgets, boredom, or bosses on Be Wealthy and Smart. And now, here's your host, Linda P. Jones.
Welcome to Be Wealthy and Smart. I'm Linda P. Jones, America's Wealth Mentor, empowering women and men worldwide to financial freedom. On today's show, we're going to talk about why the Hidden Road acquisition is major for Ripple. Now, a lot of people have talked about the fact that this is one of the largest acquisitions in crypto, Ripple spending $1.25 billion for prime broker Hidden Road. Today, I'd like to point out what are some of the important things about that acquisition that maybe haven't been talked about yet. So first of all, let's talk about what is a prime broker. A prime broker is often a division of a financial institution that provides investment services to hedge funds and institutional investors. It can be things like clearing and settling trades, providing margin financing, which is provided for them to borrow money, and for asset management. Because hedge funds often do complex trading strategies that are outside the normal retail sphere of just stocks and bonds, they can be trading derivatives, they can be trading currencies, they can be highly leveraged. There's all kinds of things that they do outside of normal retail securities laws. And that's because they're considered sophisticated investors, and so they're allowed to take more risk. But the problem is, sometimes those risks can be so large that if they aren't monitored properly, they can cause the entire financial institution to be at risk, and sometimes the entire financial system. And we saw a glimpse of this with a family office called Archegos Capital Management, run by Bill Huang, who had literally set up accounts at different prime brokers, not telling each prime broker that he had separate accounts at the other firms. So each prime broker looked at their account as his only trading vehicle and didn't take into account how highly leveraged he was across multiple prime brokers. When we ask Grok, it says that Archegos Capital Management collapsed in March of 2021, causing significant financial fallout. The fund used heavy leverage through total return swaps to build massive undisclosed positions in stocks like Viacom CBS and Discovery. When these stocks dropped, Archegos faced margin calls it couldn't meet, triggering a fire sale of over $20 billion in assets by its prime brokers, including Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. The collapse led to roughly $10 billion in losses across major banks, with Credit Suisse hit hardest at $5.5 billion, followed by Nomura at $2 billion. Huang's strategy relied on opaque derivatives, avoiding regulatory disclosure, which amplified the chaos when trades soured. In 2022, Huang was indicted for fraud and racketeering, accused of manipulating stock prices and misleading banks. He was convicted in July 2024 on 10 of 11 counts, facing potential decades in prison. The debacle exposed flaws in risk management at banks and prompted scrutiny of financial offices and swap-based leverage. It's a stark reminder of how unchecked bets can ripple through markets, but don't expect the system to overhaul itself. Leverage like this thrives until it implodes. Yes, Grok said, ripple through markets. So that's the explanation of what happened. But what Archegos did was expose systemic issues in prime brokerage. And that's why this acquisition of Hidden Road is so important. It basically provides prime brokerage services that are outside of the banking system. It eliminates banks as prime brokers. And what it does is it creates an end-to-end tokenized securities solution, where securities can be tokenized and moved on the XRP ledger faster and cheaper than what they're doing today. And because a lot of the trades today are high-frequency trading, where trades are bought and sold in a matter of seconds or even a split second, the settlement of those trades can often be dramatically delayed from when they actually happened, and this will put them more into a real-time scenario with the XRP ledger at 3 to 5 seconds of speed. So trades can actually be in real time or very close to real time rather than be so delayed and so backed up in terms of their settlement and clearing. When they're so backed up in our current system, unfortunately, it can provide an avenue for fraud, just like what Bill Huang did, where you can create multiple accounts and be duplicating services at multiple prime brokers. This will stop that from happening. It also will provide worldwide trading, lending, and settlement services. So this can be a global operation. There's no border or boundary to the XRP ledger, so anyone could use it, and it could be a global prime broker. And this will also make Ripple a dominant player in the securities investment industry. So if they're starting a tokenized stock exchange in Dallas, and they have a prime broker that doesn't require banks, now you've got an outside the banking system, outside the traditional security system, end-to-end trading mechanism. So I went back and I asked Grok, what systemic issues in prime brokerage did Archegos expose? Because that's really what happened. It really exposed massive, massive problems in prime brokerage. And here's what Grok said. The Archegos capital management collapse in March 2021 exposed several systemic issues in the prime brokerage industry, revealing vulnerabilities in risk management, transparency, and regulatory oversight. Here are the key issues highlighted. Number 1, inadequate risk management. Prime brokers failed to properly assess and manage the risks posed by Archegos' highly leveraged portfolio. Archegos used total return swaps to amass concentrated positions in a few stocks, which obscured the true extent of its exposure. Banks did not sufficiently stress test Archegos' portfolio for extreme market scenarios, leading to massive losses when stocks like Viacom CBS and Discovery plummeted. Number 2, lack of transparency. The use of derivatives like total return swaps allowed Archegos to hide its leverage and concentrated positions from both regulators and prime brokers. These instruments enabled Archegos to take synthetic positions without direct ownership, bypassing disclosure requirements. Prime brokers had limited visibility into Archegos' overall portfolio across multiple banks, as Archegos split its trades among several brokers, Credit Suisse, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs. This fragmentation prevented a holistic view of its risk profile. Number 3, over-reliance on margin lending. Prime brokers extended excessive credit to Archegos with leverage ratios reportedly as high as 8-to-1 or more. Margin calls were not enforced promptly or uniformly, exacerbating losses when Archegos failed to meet them. The competitive pressure to retain high-value clients led some banks to loosen lending standards, prioritizing revenue over prudence. And I want to pause there and say this is really a crucial point that Grok brings up here, because prime brokers want to retain these high-value, high-profitable clients that pay them big fees for prime brokerage. And so the tendency has been to be a little bit loose on some of these issues, and this is what the point is that it's made. Number 4, coordination failures among prime brokers. When Archegos' positions began to unravel, prime brokers acted in their own self-interest other than coordinating. For instance, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley quickly unwound positions, while Credit Suisse and Nomura, slower to act, suffered larger losses. Credit Suisse lost $5.5 billion and Nomura $2.9 billion. The lack of a unified approach amplified market volatility and highlighted the absence of industry-wide protocols for handling distressed clients. Number 5, regulatory gaps. Archegos, as a family office, was not subject to the same reporting requirements as hedge funds, exploiting a loophole that allowed it to operate with minimal oversight. The incident raised questions about whether regulators, such as the SEC, needed stronger authority to monitor leverage and derivatives usage by non-regulated entities. Number 6, concentration risk. Archegos' heavy bets on a small number of stocks, Viacom CBS, Tencent, Baidu, exposed the dangers of concentrated portfolios. Prime brokers failed to enforce diversification or set limits on single stock exposure, assuming Archegos' positions were hedged or manageable. And number 7, collateral and margin call weaknesses. Archegos was allowed to operate with relatively low initial margin requirements for its swap agreements. When markets turned, its collateral was insufficient to cover losses, leaving banks exposed. The delay in issuing or enforcing margin calls allowed Archegos to delay the inevitable, worsening the fallout. And it says in summary, the Archegos debacle prompted prime brokers to tighten risk controls, increase transparency around derivatives, and reassess client leverage. It also spurred regulatory discussions about closing loopholes for family offices and improving oversight of synthetic instruments. However, the incident underscored how competitive pressures and fragmented systems can still undermine financial stability. Yeah, so that highlights all of the weaknesses that I thought of when I heard about this acquisition and the strength that Ripple will be able to bring to this, not only because of the blockchain and being able to tokenize assets that will then be verifiable on the blockchain, but also because, and the crypto police won't like me saying this, if XRP's price is ever valued more highly, it also could provide very deep pockets in case of systemic problems in the future. Something that right now is on the taxpayers' shoulders, as we saw in 2008 during the Great Financial Crisis, when the TARP bill had to be passed for $800 billion to save the financial system from imploding. There is a better way, and this acquisition paves the path for it. If you haven't yet subscribed to Be Wealthy and Smart, hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified as soon as new podcasts are available. And all of my podcasts are on my website at lindapjones.com/podcasts. And while you're there, sign up for my weekly newsletter for more wealth tips for your financial freedom. That's all for today. Until next time, live the good life and be wealthy and smart.
Thank you for listening to Be Wealthy and Smart with Linda P. Jones. Share the wealth and tell your family and friends about the show. Check out our website, blog, and social media for more riches at www.bewealthyandsmart.com.